Welcome to Ithaca Politics, a series of shows that looks at the political life of Ithaca, New York. In this episode, our guests, Democrat Phoebe Brown and Republican Zach Winn. Both are candidates seeking the 2-year term to represent the 1st Ward in Ithaca. I'd like to start out with a question about the 1st Ward. Now, aside from the issues of crime and public safety, which we are going to get to, what are the issues that you would prioritize if you were council, if you got elected to council, and if you are re-elected, about these issues that are affecting the different neighborhoods of the 1st Ward? And if you would like to start it, Ms. Brown?
Of course. Before I get started, I'd like to welcome my ancestors in the room to guide me and protect me and let me use their voice. What I think would be a priority to me is to figure out how do we begin to unite all these communities of seeing the similarities and how important it is for us to work together to get change for everyone to be safe. So I don't know if I answered your question, but a big part of working in the community for me is to begin to get people to build relationships, strong relationships with one another, and understand that we are all experiencing a lot of the same issues in each of our communities. And you mentioned some of them earlier, and I'm sure we'll talk deeper on them.
One of my first priorities would be expanding the Route 14 bus service that services all of West Hill, all the way up to the hospital, including Overlook, which is not inside the city. But the issue of transportation to and from work on the public transportation for West Hill, I believe is a major one. It is technically impossible right now for someone to get off work at, say, Cornell University or Ithaca College and make their way home to West Hill on the bus because service ends at either 8 or 9 o'clock, depending on the day of the week. And I believe that by expanding the Route 14 bus service, one of the routes that was cut entirely was the 14S recently, would facilitate more people being able to be part of the economy here locally and to potentially ease some of the lack of employees at both of those institutions by making it more practical to get to and from work. Issues on the north side. The reason your question is difficult is because so many of the issues in town are connected to the specific issue you didn't want a response to, which is the criminality that is going on. As far as the flood maps are clearly an issue. One of the city council people discussed how the increased cost of flood insurance would be catastrophic for some of his constituents. And the massive increase in flood costs combined with the increase in tax rates, whether the amount that an individual owes, regardless of how it's calculated at the end of the day, is increasing. These burdens are being put on a small handful of people, whether it be in the north side, south side, or West Hill. And I think that addressing the underlying financial inequalities in this community would be very important to making all of those communities a better place to live and prevent more people from getting priced out of the community as more and more people come here and buy up a ever diminishing number of homes and making it an even more expensive place to live.
That brings up a good point. I'd like to hear from both of you. What can we do to keep residents in place in these neighborhoods? keep them from being priced out? Ms. Brown?
Well, stop gentrification, for one. We lose a lot of our living people in this community who cannot afford this community, who have to move to the outskirts. And I think if that would be a start, I think inviting people who have been relocated outside of our community, finding ways of bringing them back to this community. But one thing I do know is that the issues that we are experiencing are not new to our community, right? And there have been some solutions in some areas, and we need to figure out how we continue to make them work.
Zach, do you have thoughts about gentrification and what council people could do to impact it?
I believe that there shouldn't be any more tax breaks given to developers who are, they call it market rate. I don't think $3,500 to $5,000 a month apartments represent the typical person who lives in this community. There's a class of people who lives and works in Ithaca who don't really have any long-term stake in the affairs of what goes on here. And by building these high-end apartment buildings to the exclusion of more modestly priced dwellings is only worsening the housing shortage. And I would like to see housing prioritized for people who work. A $600 to $800 a month one-bedroom or an efficiency apartment in this town is like gold. And with the lack of employees at virtually every business in town, there has to be a place for a worker to live in order for them to maintain that job. I also see a potential for the city working with the county to build housing or incentivize the building of housing outside of downtown Ithaca, and perhaps working with TCAT to provide more regular, reliable service so people who don't have a vehicle, who can't afford to live downtown, can still get into town, work, and go home at the end of the day without it being a nightmare. And I personally have started to have to ride the TCAT for work, and I can tell you that it's incredibly unreliable and often operating at 50% capacity. So by the time it departs Green Street, it's almost completely full. Halfway through campus, there are people getting turned away. And it's just not realistic for the average person to rely on public transportation in the way it was just a few years ago. So addressing the financial shortfalls, the manpower shortages at TCAT, I think would be a vital step in order to ameliorate some of these issues.
So there has been talk about overhauling the zoning to make it more amenable for people to be able to live downtown, possibly building more in the neighborhoods. I'd like to hear your opinions on whether you believe rezoning is a viable option for, say, the First Ward. Ms. Brown?
Me again? I think that's a splendid idea. I think it would be beneficial to people of staying in the communities that they have been raised in, or coming back to communities they have been raised in. So I think it would be beneficial.
I am always suspicious when there is something proffered as if there couldn't be a negative downside, or the downsides are not even discussed. And it is one thing to allow a zoning change so somebody could put on like a mother-in-law apartment, or to do an expansion of their home. It would be another thing entirely to change zoning laws so you could put a large apartment building in what was a more traditional residential neighborhood. And the potential for the entire character of a neighborhood to be changed by the addition of one of these large buildings that you mentioned. Zoning is specifically what prevents that kind of construction in certain areas. And to remake zoning
under the guise of eliminating or reducing the housing crisis could create an entirely different set of issues for people who already have homes and are comfortable in their day-to-day lives. On the other hand, I am also in favor of the reduction in regulations and government interference into individuals' choices of what they do with their private property. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and every single one of these measures need to be inspected closely for either intentional or unintentional second and third order consequences before they're implemented.
The $4 million negotiated settlement between Cornell University and the city of Ithaca for the pilot. I'd like to know if you will choose to ratify that agreement, Ms. Brown, as a sitting council person, and Zach, if you were on council, would you agree to ratify that $4 million amount?
Cornell University essentially has the city over a barrel, because if they don't sign this agreement now, there would have to be a renegotiation in a matter of weeks, perhaps just a couple of months, before the budget would need to be finalized, and it will leave a major gap in the budget. If I was sitting on council right now, not only would I not vote yes for this deal, I would have spoken out much earlier about the complete lack of transparency regarding this process. I've submitted a Freedom of Information law request to find out exactly who's doing the negotiating and the communications between various members of City Hall and Cornell University's financial management and President Pollock, all those people. And within those documents, I think there would be a lot more insights into the actual process that occurred here. $4 million is totally inadequate to address any of the real issues that are affecting the community, whether that be the lack of law enforcement resources, the bus system coming apart at the seams, the inability to pay a prevailing, competitive wage for Department of Public Works, firefighters, everybody who makes a city function. It comes down to people. It is not just a system. The people are the system. And it is clear that those people are not being valued in a way that makes working for the city of Ithaca attractive. The city is having difficulty hiring people and is continuing to hemorrhage staff across all departments. So to address that is going to require a significant infusion of cash. And I think Cornell University will only produce the kind of money that is required, between $20 to $30 million at a minimum, if they are forced to do that. And I don't see any real will to fight dirty with Cornell, considering that many current members of council and City Hall have close relationships with Cornell University. Some are Cornell University
So what would
employees.
be your ideas then in terms of boosting the amount from Cornell?
To refuse to accept any money from them until they come forward with a reasonable offer. And at the same time, I would begin to play hardball with Cornell, whether that be redirecting the buses so they do not, the TCAP bus system, so it does not cross campus, denying building permits as we've done in the past, publicly maligning the university. Specifically, I had the idea of putting out advertisements in the student publications of the fellow Ivies, pointing out how Cornell University is not a good partner to Ithaca, and using the power of shame to force Cornell to pay.
Ms. Brown, I believe the vote is coming up tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.
Can you tell us what your position will be?
I can't tell you what my position will be. I'm going to sleep on it tonight because I'm pretty much torn, right? I do understand that without this deal with Cornell, we will be in a really hard place. And that's for all the raises that's coming along, or a lot of the other things that money is needed for, right? And so that part I'm thinking about our employees and people who work for the city and that kind of stuff, because if we stop it, that 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 affects them. Also, it affects our community. Uh, if we don't receive these funds from Cornell, that means taxes will have to be raised. And is our community ready for that, right? But I have to say, watching my community in the way that they have come through about this deal have made my heart say, wait a minute, Phoebe, wait a minute. Because to be perfectly honest, I think, so we've been getting 1.6 million all these years, 21 years. And for Cornell to even raise that has been, I believe, from the push from this community. And it may have just started, right? You know, because I did think about, well, hey, they had this deal for 21 years and we wasn't pushing back. However, this great push from our community has already have made Cornell kind of come back, because they offered us 3.2 million, right? And then we denied that. And then they came back with 4 million, right? That happened, I think, because of the renegotiation, but a lot because of how our community has stood up to Cornell. So right now, tonight I'm gonna be praying hard on my decision. So I haven't totally made it quite yet, you know, and I'm torn because I don't want to see the city suffering financially, as it will if because the reality and the truth is Cornell don't have, because of state law, they don't have to. Even though for me, I'm thinking more than anything, they're sitting on stolen land like we all are. So with that, just that in place, they should be wanting to give back to not only this community, but also the indigenous community. So like I said, tonight will be, you know, some pros and cons in my, you know, when I sit down, but it also, and I know I'll be swayed tomorrow by the community coming out, because I know they coming up out in full force. They did an amazing rally yesterday up at Cornell. So this is what I look for, and forgive me if I get a little touchy here, but this is what I look for from a community. Do you see how we've came together for this? Like if we did that in all areas and things we needed, how powerful would we be? And how much could we get done? Right? You know, I get a little preachy sometimes. Yeah, I could go 2 minutes, right? But anyway, that's how I feel. I don't know if I specifically, what I'm saying right now is I haven't made my decision.
Okay.
I'll sleep on it and pray on it.
Ms. Brown, you've been on the long road of reimagining public safety from the beginning. And can you tell us your thoughts about the process? And do you feel hopeful for the future of RPS?
I really am hopeful from what I've watched the county do, CJC, with Mola Leader Smiley. Yeah, I've been hopeful in some areas. I've been also saddened because it was delayed, and you know, a lot of things kept coming at it, delaying it. And what hurt the most is watching the communities who came out, because I think what got lost with reimagining public safety is why Cuomo gave that executive order 203. It was because of what had been happening in the Black and brown community being killed by police officers, right? That was the executive order, right? And we kind of forgot that. And they asked the community of color to reimagining public safety. And many of they were traumatized for first what was happening in their communities, but also being able to come out and share what they felt they needed, right? And then to have it kind of chopped up, delayed, waited on, and that kind of stuff, it's kind of sort of disrespectful. But however, we came back with something that wasn't quite what they asked for. However, if we have someone like Mona Lisa Smiley continuing to lead us, and when we hire the other people that's coming on, I believe we have to get it started so that we can see if it's working, if it's don't. What is very upsetting is to continue to hear that reimagining public safety is why we have a shortage of police officers. We have a shortage in many of our fields.
Zach, I know you've been critical of RPS, but if elected, you're going to be working alongside council members to essentially fulfill some of the goals of reimagining public safety. So I'm wondering how that's going to reconcile with your beliefs, or are you going to take an active stance to roll back some of these provisions?
I think more than rolling back specific provisions of a system, a process that's been done twice now. There was the original process that excluded the district attorney, the sheriff, and the Ithaca Police Department leadership. And then that process was redone, including those major stakeholders. And those were the recommendations that were implemented. What would be most critical, in my opinion, is a full public repudiation of the activities of former Mayor Myrick as it related to reimagining public safety. When Executive Order 203 was put forth by Governor Cuomo, Svante Myrick used his think tank buddies to hijack the process and for a brief moment make the defund the police narrative of 2020 and 2021 into policy. When that occurred, 15% of the Ithaca Police Department left their job within 2 months of the announcement, before pen even hit paper. The lack of manpower at the Ithaca Police Department is a direct result of reimagining public safety. The unwillingness for officers to laterally transfer into the department is a specific consequence of reimagining public safety. The Ithaca Police Department now has a national negative reputation as a place where you don't want to be a cop. A cop who is looking for a job can work anywhere they want to right now. And why would they choose Ithaca, where they are told the department is being defunded? With respect, Phoebe, you yourself have spoken about a desire to redirect funding from the Ithaca Police Department towards social programs. I personally don't believe that that kind of rhetoric should be coming from sitting members of council, considering the effect that it has on the remaining police officers who have decided to stay here and continue to protect the public, where many officers who have served for, in some instances, decades, have opted to move on instead of staying here to continue to do their job.
Okay, I'm still not quite clear on how you're going to fulfill a role as a council person with RPS essentially being enacted as it is.
I would see to it that future changes to public safety undergo more scrutiny than they did in the past. I believe that reimagining public safety as it exists was an abuse of process and a manipulation of procedural outcomes carried out by a large number of people. And at the end of the day, the process can be blamed for the result. And there isn't any one individual who is willing to take responsibility for its clear failure. And I would see to it that the issue of the failure of the process is not forgotten and is continuously, there's work to be done to correct the mistakes of the past.
And there we go again, blaming, reimagining public safety for the what people have begun to see. So we forgot all about George Floyd. We forgot about why the executive order was put in place. We blamed the people once again, traumatizing them for now we're gonna blame it on Svante, right? So what we have here again, this is not about, this here again is where I talk about us working together to make a difference, right? Yes, I said, as Kayla said earlier, I never said anything about defunding police. I talked about redistributing some of those monies that will go to communities who are already keeping our communities safe and have been keeping our communities safe, who work more closely with individuals in preventing crime. Police officers come after the crime is committed. So we can sit here all night long, but what I would like to see is how what we have in place now, how the IPD, because we passed all that with Savante and all that. We passed that now. How are we going to make our communities safe for everyone?
The latest resolution before council regarding homeless encampment in the jungle essentially removes the language of enforcement of unhoused people sleeping in public places. And I'd like to pass along a scenario. I know you saw the previous show, so how would you respond if we have an individual that is sleeping in a Seneca Street bus shelter and he won't accept kind of the nudges from the outreach workers to move into the jungle, where it's sanctioned essentially, and won't or can't accept the emergency shelter provisions? Should the police take a more hard line against this individual, even though he really hasn't caused any, harm against anybody else?
I think the idea of an outreach worker encouraging someone to go live in the jungle is terrifying. Mm-hmm. And to understanding that there are services available, to your question, why is this person not allowed into the shelter system? Was it because they destroyed hotel rooms? Are they a registered sex offender? Have they committed violence at the shelter? So there is a lot of nuance to each individual situation. If a gentleman is sleeping in the bus shelter, is it in the summer or is he freezing? Because there's heat in there. You can press the button. And if somebody is out in the cold or trying to stay dry, I don't think the police or anyone else is trying to criminalize that behavior. But there is clearly a gap between the jungle and the jail that needs to be filled somehow. I walk past St. John's homeless shelter at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there can be more than a dozen people just hanging out in that alley because they have nowhere to go. The possibility of getting work is unrealistic when you don't have ID, when you don't have a place to wash your clothes, no ability to live a regular schedule. So to your original question, which was...
Well, enforcement has been taken out of
yes,
the most recent
it is terrifying to me that, again, with respect to you, your fellow Solidarity Slate member, Jorge DiFendini, was the individual principally responsible for removing the red zones and enforcement from the plan. Without enforcement, there is no plan. Creating a green zone and encouraging people to move there introduces the possibility of a runaway, out-of-control situation. If you're telling people you can come and live here for free on city land, that message can go far beyond the confines of Ithaca. We already have people traveling out of state to come live here. Ithaca has a positive reputation as a good place to live on the street. By sanctioning encampments within the green zone, there's no telling how many people might come or what activities might transpire there. There are already issues with methamphetamine being cooked on city land, people being kidnapped and murdered, continuous overdoses in difficult to access places. So I find the entire long period to arrive back at square one now to be a very negative outcome, especially for people living in 8th Floral Estates who are, according to George McGonigal, the gentleman whose seat that we're running for, he says they're under siege. There are a bunch of retired folks there. I spoke to one woman, she's 90 years old, she sleeps next to a pistol in case someone kicks down her door. And I don't blame her at all.
Okay, I'd like to hear from Ms. Brown. We are limited on time.
Oh, okay. So for one, I'll share my experience. I'm someone who came here, and I came here and was homeless. When I got here, that was 31 years ago, and the shelter system was totally different. It saved my life, right? So the shelter system, I will not say, is something that should not be something that we should think about and push and make it better, right? So to go about what you're talking about is somebody sleeping in that center. For one, I am the one who asked to change the language of enforcement. It's scary for people, right? But however, if that happened and there was someone who's refusing to go to the green zone, and here's where we come in with our people who keep communities safe. For one, I'd get in touch with someone through mutual aid. There's a big mutual aid who's constantly, and they have immediate needs, who's waiting for people who reach out and say, this person needs such and such. So this is something that we can work closely with the police department, the social workers to know about. However, I worked with it's called the Creative Hub. Now I'm still in that building with the organization I works for, Alliance of Families for Justice. And what we do is right away, if we hear, and this is what we've done for years, is we will find someone who's willing to support a person who needs housing for the night or a few days. And people will donate to make that happen. I've also been able to experience this lately. I live on Alice Miller Way, and there's been individuals who's been using that area. What I've been doing is going out and talking to her, and I spoke with a woman who's been sanctioned for 180 days from the shelter, right? So she won't be able to find housing until November. What I did was I kind of meet with her, got a phone number, we talk, and also reached out to the mayor and other people to find out how can we make this something work for her. So it's about community working together. Once again, here we go. If we're in relationship with one another, we can reach out to each other to make things happen, right? So for one, the social worker or the officer who do come upon this individual, they will have the necessity communication to reach out to other organizations that would be willing to also pull up the slack. That's in my head, and that's what I'm hoping that we can help to happen, right? You know, because I also feel for the people who are in Nate's Floral Estate. I also don't feel that we should put the green zone in there near them. That should not be what it is. So there is still some more work that we have to do, and we have to continue to do. The jungle is not a new place, and when we talk about crime, it's been crime happening throughout Ithaca, right? I'm not gonna go into that right now because I know we don't have the time.
Yeah, we do have to.
We have to wrap it up, but I do believe like there are some work that can happen.